show you guys the Grand Royale, and it's one of the many senior living facilities that we're going to be doing in the next 12 months. I love senior living, and I'll explain more about why. For those who saw my last presentation on Thursday on the Jacksonville Opportunity Zone Senior Living Facility, that is a very similar type of structure, both single story with a memory care and assisted living facility that has high cash flow and preferred equity. So the contents will go to this confidentiality, why senior living investment overview, highlights, terms, cash flow, talk about the location a little bit, demographics, and highlight a little bit on the Grand Royale, and then highlight the team and experience. So just as you guys remember, this is a confidential investment. You guys have the first look at this, so hopefully you guys can make sure so hopefully please don't share it without our permissions, um, but happy to share it with anyone else. If you guys let us know, we're happy to share it. So why senior living? So I love senior living because it goes with a ton of tailwind of the fundamentals of the silver tsunami. So with the silver tsunami, basically that's the aging of America and the undersupply of quality assisted living, skilled nursing, and independent living facilities like this one. The age of the population of 85 and above, which is the target demographic here, is creating unprecedented demand. And we're looking to take advantage of that demand. Not only is it at a macro level, but at the local level, there's a ton of demand in Gladstone, Missouri, which is where this facility is located. Another thing I love about senior living is you're really combining the best of real estate and the best of high operation cash flow business. You're looking at rents typically 4 to 5 times higher than multifamily, with only expenses 3 times higher. So with that in mind, you're looking at probably 80% higher yields than multifamily units for the same type of asset and same kind of Class A asset. So the Grand Royale is a recapitalization of a 105-unit newly converted senior living community. We're essentially buying it or recapitalizing it at $16.17 million on an $11 million loan, 68% loan to value. And we're acquiring it at well below replacement costs. The Grand Royale enters the market with strong local fundamentals and limited competitors. There hasn't been a competitor built in this nearby facility since 2003. And so this can be offering predictable high yield cash flow with significant tax benefits. So the investment highlights, just one thing I really like about this is, again, Gladstone, Missouri is one of the well-to-do suburbs in northern Kansas City. It's conveniently located right outside Kansas City proper, but it's also really close to several hospitals that are great feeder systems to the Grand Royale. We're offering this as a preferred equity investment, and it would be offering fixed monthly cash flow of 6, 12, and 8% for the first 3 years with monthly payments. The preferred equity is one of my favorite ways to provide investment offerings nowadays because it offers similar risk to debt, but still provides returns like equity. We're also offering for the first time a really short term here, 3 years, and the investors would be recapitalized out at end of year 3, but still providing you guys the K1s and the tax benefits that you come to expect at Tozy Capital. This is a newly developed center, and what it was before was actually a pre-existing owned by a REIT that was a skilled nursing and assisted living and independent care facility. So it was actually a senior housing facility before, but it just wasn't utilized in any fashion. So we've gone through the last 12 months and gone through a whole gut job renovation focused on architecture design, emphasizing spacious interior, for many of the residents to enjoy. Um, the management is also very experienced. We're pleased to have Epic Healthcare Solutions come in on the project. They actually will be investors on the project as well. And that allows us to incentivize their operating and profit sharing model so that they really maximize returns for investors. And I really like the fact that this is a diverse mix of 43 independent living, 34 independent living, 43 assisted living units, and 28 skilled nursing units. Really, this is a continuum of care that graduates from independent living, assisted living, and then skilled nursing. And for those that don't know, the certificate of needs needed to get assisted living and skilled nursing is pretty complex and oftentimes burdensome. So we're happy that this facility already has that. We're essentially acquiring it with limited, with that hurdle already taken care of, which will typically take 6 to 8 months for any facility to get and could potentially be denied by the local governing boards. So the investment terms are very simple. It's 3 years, and the first year being 6% return annualized with monthly payments of 0.5%. And second year would be 1%. Third year would be 1.5%. And of course, we'll close at the end of 2020, and we'll do a cost segregation study and provide the investors the typical K1 benefits of depreciation. So I want to then just simply highlight the cash flow. It's a little bit redundant here, but 6%, 12%, 18%. I just want to keep highlighting that this is very predictable, fixed returns, and should expect that on the second month after ownership. So the investment timeline is it's a very short timeline for investment. We're looking at funding by mid-December. We're also going to be closing by the end of the year, and investors can expect the first payment, monthly payment in March, and we'll catch up a little bit by the end of the year for that first 1 month miss. And then occupancy will stabilize around year 2 and return to capital year 3. So I want to highlight where this location is, where the Grand Royale is. It's in Gladstone, Missouri, a very well-to-do suburb. And I want to highlight that fact that there's several hospitals nearby. These hospitals present a great feeder system to the Grand Royale, as I said in the video. North Kansas City Hospital, St. Luke's Hospital, and Liberty have discharges of around 20,000 total discharges and around 2,500 to skilled nursing facilities like this one. So we already signed up for the list to get those skilled nursing facilities leased up. So in fact, we believe that our skilled nursing facilities will be the first to be fully leased up. And then when they see how nice Grand Royale is, for those who can independently live, they will convert to independent living. For those who need assisted living, they will convert to assisted living, and the population then keeps feeding into it and keeps graduating, and the occupancy should mature at around 12 to 14 months, but it only takes around 38% occupancy to break even on the debt. So that's one of the reasons why I love seeing living homes, because of the high cash flow that it does provide. So I want to zone in on the demographics of Gladstone. So one thing you want to highlight in any data analysis of a local demographic relative to senior living is, are there seniors that could afford this? Because this isn't necessarily a cheap option, but for those who can, because this is one of the high-end facilities, it's only 4,000 to 5,000. It's actually a sort of a medium average facility, because you can have in-home care for around 8,000 to 9,000. But for $4,000 to $5,000, we do a financial background check on all the new tenants to ensure that they have 2 to 3 years of financials ready and available to pay for the next 2 to 3 years at the Grand Royale. And so that's the only way we accept them. For skilled nursing, if we do take Medicare, and those are actually very easy payment systems. It's a system that is easy to then take up and then convert them into potentially independent living or assisted living. Another reason why I love the Grand Royale is that for the next 5 years, you can see a significant bump in the aging population, which is the target population for the Grand Royale. Again, I want to highlight the continuum of care here. Really, you're looking at 3 levels of service. And the only thing missing here is memory care. Those are the 4 that you would typically see in any senior living facility. But most senior living facilities only have 1 or 2. So I'm excited to highlight that there's 3 with independent living designed to enable healthy, independent older adults to enjoy a lifestyle filled with recreation, education, and social activities. And the Grand Royale has many of those recreation and educational and social activities available to them. We have a bar, we have a movie theater, and we have several other convenient amenities to make it feel like an all-inclusive resort. And then as they graduate into assisted living, for those who can't live independently by themselves, that's no longer safe or advised, they can continue to live at the Grand Royale, continue to have their friends, and to have a staff that will take care of all their needs and still have all the amenities afforded to them. And of course, we have skilled nursing, where we have 24-hour registered nurse service that will allow those to need direct daily care more provided and more supported in still a very assisted living type of arrangement. And of course, the skilled nursing facility for those short-term care, um, sometimes they will be discharged after they leave the Grand Royale, but the hope is and the expectation is that we will get to uh, retain some of these feeder discharges from hospitals as they really acclimate to the area, acclimate to the Grand Royale, and become tenants or residents of the independent living or assisted living facilities as they rehab and no longer need skilled nursing assistance. So we have a variety of floor plans available, both studio, 1 bedroom, skilled nursing, and 2 bedroom. And for the 2 bedroom, of course, we can have couples there as well as friends to live by themselves there. So we have 105 units, but we can have multiple residents live, more than 105 residents in total. These are artist rendering of the interior common area. Uh, what I want to highlight here is that there will be a beauty parlor and a wine bar and speakeasy. It's incredible that the seniors do really love socializing, and they love this. They love to have these amenities, and once they see it, they will be. We really believe that we can dominate the market and lease it very quickly. We have some interior residential units as well. And I want to highlight that COVID measures are also being taken in place. We have, we will have visitations that would be very limited and restricted. But for those who do get, for the visitors that do appear, who come, we want to make sure that the families can come by safely. So we have a barrier for them to come in and still feel like they're part of the community, but we'll keep our seniors safe, because one infection can spread to everything. So that's something that we're looking to make sure we have all these regulations checks. All staff and visitors also regularly checked as their temperature for the temperature as they enter the facility, and all staff will have weekly COVID tests, which will help them will help us contain any exposure. But of course, we do expect that over the next year when we lease up, we hope that the vaccine will be more widely available in the Q3 of 2021, which will help reduce all the risk exposure that COVID has impacted. The investment team is me and Chuck. We're providing $1.28 million of sponsor equity in this investment, and the other 3.84 million is from the pref equity for the investors. And Chuck is both the developer of the Grand Royale and co-investing in this deal, and will be also the on the boots asset manager, on the ground asset manager for Epic Healthcare Solutions. They want to introduce Epic Healthcare Solutions. Brian and Brian are the co-founders of Epic Healthcare Solutions. They have a significant amount of experience managing. Brian McCoy has specifically has 36 experience managing 36 skilled nursing, assisted living, and independent living centers across America. And Brian has a lot of background in optimizing the budgets and ensuring income maximization. And we also have Mary and Sandy. And Sandy is especially specialized in skilled nursing, a registered nurse, and is a chief nursing officer for Epic Healthcare Solutions. I went through that presentation pretty quickly, so I want to then open it to questions. Yeah, so a lot faster than I thought it would be.
Okay, well, that was great, Aang. Thank you. We actually got some pretty good questions coming into the chat here. You touched on this a little bit, Aang, about how the COVID pandemic has affected senior living regulations and any risks. Are there any other regulations that have been put into place? And could you also talk a little bit about how senior living is really favored by institutional investors as a really economically resilient and recession-proof asset?
Yeah, so to the COVID point, the main impact has been on these mom and pop senior living facilities. And when I say senior living facilities, I mean nursing homes. When you think of these nursing homes, they're really converted large, small apartment buildings converted to nursing homes run by mom and pop operators without any of the restrictions and testing and rigor that these bigger facilities provide. So when you look at the bigger facilities impact, there just hasn't been much spread of COVID. Of course, this population is susceptible to it, so we want to make sure that we can protect our seniors. To the point of why institutional investors love senior living, one thing that I'll highlight is senior living facilities at this scale and level, meaning these Class A facilities, are almost all run and operated by REITs. And one of the reasons why REITs love them is because of the high predictable cash flow. It's a high operating business with high yield and high cash flow and very good tailwinds of the fundamentals that I mentioned of the silver tsunami and the limited supply. In the next 10 years, there will be a significant shortage of the supply and demand curve that has already been highlighted even this year.
Okay, and that actually leads beautifully into our next question here. Could you speak a bit about the supply and demand dynamics specifically for the Gladstone area? For example, is there competition of facilities for hospitals that feed into, refer people into Grand Royale? What are the supply and demand dynamics looking like right now?
Yeah, so there are 4 close by assisted living facilities that the only assisted living, but the age of the age that those were built were in the 80s, 1980s. The newest one was built in 2003, and they do offer assisted living and independent living. And then there's one that was built a little bit farther away that had memory care. The good thing is that all these are at roughly 80 to 85% occupancy. So already the supply is nearly at its limit. And so the local municipality has been looking for a new facility that's even more conveniently located. One thing that I want to highlight also is when you look at where these centers are being built, people want to live in the communities that they're familiar with. While they won't necessarily be able to leave or can't have the same mobility as before, they want to live close to the family. They want to live in the communities they lived in all their lives. And Gladstone is a very historic town. Chuck actually had his grandfather at one of the at this facility, actually at this facility, when it was a nursing home around 20 years ago. So it's one of those things that people just don't like to live, not to be too far away from where their families are. And Chuck actually has an office around 2 blocks from the Grand Royale.
Okay, great. And are you potentially aware of any permits that might be applied or issued for nearby senior living facilities that might be built in the Gladstone area?
So we have a line of sight on all the existing permits, and there needs to be essentially a certificate of needs, which means we do a feasibility study. We check how many assisted living, skilled nursing demand there is in a nearby area, and we obtain as much as possible. And so for the next facility to come online, they would need to do the same thing. But now that we've occupied the space, it would be much harder for them to come online. And so right now, there are no new facilities being built or being issued at this time.
Awesome. And during the presentation, you spoke a little bit about the break-even occupancy rate. Do we have a specific breakdown of what the occupancy percentage looks like across the three different kinds of units?
So what? So right. So I just be clear. Um, we are buying it at unlease, meaning that we are just opening it in January, and that's the huge value of this property, that we're essentially buying it with newly developed interiors and asset, and within 6 to 8 months we should hit around 40% occupancy, which is enough we need only 38% to break even for debt. um, and so we believe that skilled nursing will be filled up very fast due to the feeder system. It will likely be the first to be fully occupied. And as we get independent living and skilled nursing fed in from the feeder systems of skilled nursing, we can quickly lease that up. Epic Healthcare Solutions has said that this is one of the best facilities they've seen, and they do expect to be able to lease it to occupancy to stabilization, which is 80%, within 14 months.
Yeah, and on that note, would you mind sharing a little bit more about what the relationship between investors and Epic Management Company looks like? For example, would tenants be paying Tozy directly or working with Epic Management?
So they'll be paying Epic Management directly, and just like any property management for any multifamily, they pay Epic, and then that cash flow, the net cash flow goes to us. They take a 5% property management fee. So it's actually very similar to multifamily. Um, and we're actually typically actually 4%. So we're actually giving them a little bit higher property management fee in lieu of having them co-invest with us in the preferred equity stack. So they're actually now incentivized. And so that gets graduated down to 4% as they recoup some of their terms. So what we're trying to do is align our incentives with Epic Healthcare Solutions so that they maximize revenue as fast as possible.
Okay, great. And we have a question on just the investment timeline. How come the investment is structured at 3 years? What makes that the optimal timeline for investors?
So so we have several other investments that do go longer. And one thing that we've been trying to do with Tozy Capital is really understand what investors need and what they're looking for. Um, we will have future investments that will be longer than 3 years, and we've presented recently investments that are 10 years. One thing I want to highlight is that there's a pretty big demand for the 3-year term and even a shorter term if possible. So people just don't like to be locked into too long of a term. How we came at 3 years, essentially it takes less than 2 years to get to stabilization, and then we'll go for a HUD refinance, which then will capitalize out the investors. This provides the investors the safest type of return profile and quick, easy depreciation benefits for the first 2020 tax filing.
Oh, okay, and then someone just came in. Is this also an OZ fund?
Now, this is not an opportunity zone fund. The only options fund we do have is the Jacksonville senior living facility that we're building with Build Senior Living, which is another operator. And I love these developer operators. That's one of the best ways to ensure that you're building to the specification of the operations.
Great. And I guess just back on the investment timeline, will there be an option in the future to invest in senior living over the full 10 years where you plan to hold and receive a higher return in the end?
Yes, I don't necessarily like to talk about another investment at the same time I pitch one investment, but you guys are all investors, and I want to highlight that you guys have the option to invest in anything you want. In the next 2 months, we'll be presenting a senior living fund that will essentially be pref equity 12% payments with 5-year term with the option to then extend another 5 years.
And I guess for this specific investment, will Tozy retain the property or will there be attempts to sell the property at the end of 3 years?
Tozy will retain the property.
Great. And there's another question just on senior living and just the operational component. There it's not just real estate, but also medical operations. So how has Tozy developed the relationships to ensure that the medical operations side is covered as well?
So the great thing is Epic Healthcare Solutions has all that knowledge, institutional knowledge ready. They've already built the relationships with the local hospitals. They're already staffing up. They already posted for. They already got their first director of operations and director of nursing. In the facility, we have several med bays as well, and so we have the facility ready to go. We're not necessarily the specialist in the medical field, and so we're going to rely on Epic Healthcare Solutions to provide that institutional understanding.
Great. And we have another question just on the institutional investment side. Can you talk a little bit about why senior living has been kind of closed off to retail investors in the past? I know we covered that a little bit here, but maybe just how Tozy is changing the overall profile for accessing senior living deals to everyday investors?
Yeah. So one thing that you're going to find with what we're looking across all these senior living facilities is these were typically sold off, bought as REITs. This institution before was a REIT. Our relationship with Build Senior Living was predicated on the fact that they rejected an offer from a REIT for $1 billion. We're essentially coming in as the capital partners and as the managing and marketing partners for them. We're looking to essentially be the institution for these really high performing operators like Epic Healthcare Solutions, Build Senior Living, and Chuck Coda. Why this hasn't been as readily available is because this just isn't as common of an investment. People haven't, with any type of investment, what you want to look for is how easy is it to get into. A lot of people can get into multifamily. A lot of people can buy single family houses. A lot of people can flip single family houses. The harder that an asset class can get into, the more potentially lucrative it is, and the more restrictions on for retail investors there are. Not necessarily restrictions; it's just availability and access. A lot of the capital coming in from institutional investors are much cheaper cost of capital. So for high-end operators, for bigger operators, they're looking for really cheap cost of capital. I really want to open it up to our Tozy Capital investors and members so that they have the same rewards and fruits of the senior living investments as all the institutional players have.
Okay, great. And I love this new question that just came in. Don't old people tend to go down south for retirement? What is the demographic that looks like in this age in Gladstone in terms of age?
Yeah, that's a very good question. One thing that I one thing that I found through my whole research on senior living is yes, people do like to live in warmer areas, but for the most part, if available, they like to live where they grew up. People aren't that mobile when they get to their end of life. when we built it, when we have another facility in Michigan, which is also not necessarily a warm weather facility. When our partners at Building Living built that facility in Michigan, one thing we found out that a lot of the Florida residents that migrated south came back north because they wanted to see their friends again, see their family again, because the family was still in Michigan. They wanted to be able to have that connection with the grandkids. Their grandkids, their great grandkids are in Gladstone, are in Kansas City. They don't want to have to be isolated from their extended family, but they want to have a community that allows them to have all the amenities like the ones in Florida or Arizona. So that's why I'm very excited that we're able to provide that for our seniors.
Okay, great. And it looks like we have time just to squeeze in one last question. But what is the minimum amount that partners can invest for this particular offering?
So we typically expect our investors to come in around 200,000. But I want to make sure that for investors, you guys are our current investors. You guys can come in where you guys comfortable with. We typically do have a $100,000 minimum, but we will have multiple other facilities, other opportunities as well. This is a 3-year term. I do expect this to be sold out pretty quickly. It's one of the only 3-year terms we have, and it's been in high demand from our investors.
Okay, great. So just being mindful of time here, we're going to start wrapping up tonight's presentation. As a reminder, this presentation is only currently available to Tozy Capital's current partners. So after this presentation, keep an eye out on your inbox because we will be sending you invites for first access to this investment before opening it up to general investors later this week. But before we send everyone off, Eng, do you have any closing remarks or final comments that you'd like to make?
Yeah, I was just in Kansas City earlier this week, and that's where I was filming that video. I really like Grand Royale because the developer put in nearly $15 million of improvements and essentially selling it to us at a below the replacement cost level. We're providing pref equity and a very short term, providing K1s and the same depreciation benefits that everyone's used to getting. And we really fundamentally believe that this is going to be a quick, easy win for investors. One of the things that I'm learning from this whole investment space is senior living facilities have very high cash flow and very predictable cash flow. I really like the opportunity to present to you guys first, to our investors. You guys, we couldn't have done all this without you guys, and hopefully we can partner on this and many more opportunities to come.
Okay, so that wraps up tonight's presentation. As a reminder, please keep an eye out in your inbox tonight as we will be sending those invites shortly. And as always, please feel free to follow up with Eng or anyone on the team via email, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending tonight on this Sunday evening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time.
Bye.